Hey, Aiden, who's the most popular woman in the world?
My wife.
Okay, well, according to Next Generation, it's somebody else.
I don't know. I think they're wrong.
Uh, okay, all right. Well, can you guess who she might be?
What year is it? It is 1997.
Yes.
I mean it's Eris Gainsborough, right? Eris.
Nope.
Tifa.
She's. Well, you're getting closer.
Lara Croft.
There you go.
Yes.
The most popular woman in the world. We've got a lot of things to discuss here as Next Generation looks back on a generation that is currently generating, at least as of printing, 1997. You've got FunFactor, two old gamers reviewing old video game magazine reviews. I'm Ty Shalter, he's Aiden Moher, and we're two professional writers who grew up loving the video games and video game magazines of the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Every episode, we take a critical look back on the games media that, for better and for worse, inspired us to do what we do. First, go to funfactorpod.com and follow the show on your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a rating or review on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your media. We'll read the best, kindest, funniest, and most insightful ones on the air in our letters section. Please consider becoming a member of FunFactor Ultra, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the swanky members-only channels of our Discord, the place where you get the live stream link to watch us as we record this very session that you're observing or listening to right now on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to funfactorpod.com and I promise you cannot miss the sign-up widget on our homepage. Then help us spread the word. Shout us out on Blue Sky at funfactorpod.com and everywhere else at funfactorpod. Aiden, there were two main shopping malls in the area where I grew up, and against all odds, there still are those two same shopping malls, both still trucking along. One's doing great. The other has been on its last legs for about 13 years, but it's still open. So good for it. I sent you a link in our chat. I want you to try and pull that up as I tell this story. Way back in 1996, in the cooler, fancier mall of the one of the two that's still open, a nail salon opened up called 90s Nails. I was in high school at the time, and just about everyone I knew had the exact same series of thoughts, which is, okay, why 90s Nails in 1996? Like, it's not really cool to be like, hey, this stuff is from the decade that it currently is now. Yeah.
You're
like
closer to the
wouldn't
aughts,
it be
to Y2K than you are.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's not old enough. It's not old. It's not retro. It's not the future. We're like literally 4 years from the year 2000, from Y2K. Are they going to change it? Like, what? No, they kept it 90s Nails for the rest of the 90s and all the oddies and the 2010s. And even though practically every other storefront in that mall has changed hands many times in the intervening 30 years, 90 Nails celebrates its 30th anniversary of being in business this year of our Lord 2026. You can see their Facebook page here. It's the exact same sign. 90s Nails has not changed.
It's a pretty good aesthetic. Like,
Yeah.
It looks like a place called 90s Nails. And if it's working for you, like, it's working for you. I think.
Yeah,
right?
and it wrapped all the way around to being like retro cool.
Yeah, exactly. The
So
kids, right? They yearn for the 90s now for some reason.
Literally, yes. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Is there anything in your life, any establishment thing, anything where it was like it tied itself to a cultural moment and was like, this is this thing that we all like right now, and yet persisted, survived.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the reverse where I live. We have some malls too that are somehow still around. And again, there's like the good mall. And then there's a few like malls that I swear to God have like been on the verge of death for, like you said, like 13 years,
Yes.
15 years, 20 years. But they've all like, almost all of them have had name changes since they were like, you know, it was cool to go to the mall. But everybody still calls them by the name that they were 25 years ago. Like they've never been able to kind of take on. Even friends of mine who are like from a different province and have only lived here for a decade, so like well beyond the name changes, even they use the old names for the malls. And so like that's sort of the opposite phenomenon of like something that's like it can't grow up even though it wants to. But it also makes me think, like, you know, as anyone who listens to this knows, I have a lot of like retro tech in my house. And I think a lot about the word rewind, and we see it, you know, you rewind a Netflix show, you rewind your music, you rewind in video games on emulators now, right?
Yes. Yes.
And one day I said to my kids, I was like, do you like know why it's called rewind? Like, you know, but because it referred to physically rewinding the film on the tapes, VHS tapes or cassette tapes. And it's just funny to me how that one of everything has sort of like stuck around. Same with, I get fast forward still makes sense because it doesn't refer to like the physical like rewinding of tape. But rewind is one that I've always thought is pretty funny.
Well, 90s Nails opened right in the heart of the time period we've been covering across our first season, the generation gap. And as our kind of intentional, kind of chronological journey reaches the end of 1997, the history captured by these magazines is already beginning to rhyme. Way back in our 5th episode, we covered Next Generation issue number 5. It's laminated cover, premium paper stock, its sleek sort of futuristic graphical style, its aspirationally mature and intelligent editorial content were meant to herald the like world-changing future realities made possible by, you know, like 32-bit video game consoles. But as we've covered in recent episodes, at this point we're already seeing sequels to the early tentpole PlayStation and Saturn games. Mm-hmm. Many of the most visionary creations and technological leaps forward that would come out of this cycle have already come out. And here, go ahead. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I'm just agreeing. It makes sense. Yeah.
And here in issue 36, almost every page will be dedicated to either declaring a winner of this generation or looking forward to the next one. In fact, the magazine itself is just 19 issues away from a complete visual overhaul and a name change to Next Gen. So as our generation gap season is ending, the next generation gap of video games, it's already opening up. Online gaming, affordable 3D graphics cards are powering a PC gaming revolution. Arcade machines are about to reach the peak of their powers. VR seems tantalizingly close. Like commercially quote VR adjacent things keep coming out. Details of Sega and Sony's next consoles are already leaking. And if you remember back in issue 5 of Next Generation, that wild interview with then Sony exec Steve Race brought up the secret industry fear that the 16-bit generation's success was a one-off, just a teenage fad. And now here, the two pillars of that generation, Nintendo and Sega, are a clear second and distant third to electronics giant Sony. Do you remember having any like fear or trepidation at this time about where the console market was headed, or was it all just dreams of arcade perfect ports and internet networked gaming?
Yeah, no, it seemed like a really exciting time for me. It definitely didn't feel, you know, I was never a Sega kid. So Sega's fate with the Saturn, like I thought the Saturn was cool. I mean, we've talked about the Saturn and we will talk about it more, but you know, I thought the Saturn was cool, but I had no emotional stakes in it. So it's like, you know, hitting the ground with a thud in North America didn't really instill me with any fear. Sony and what they were doing with the PlayStation was just so exciting. And the fact that the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 were so different in their approach to like the types of games that they were like catering and what Nintendo was doing and the games Nintendo was making, whereas Sony wasn't really even making games. They were creating this platform and inviting like the biggest third parties to come make games, sell them for affordable prices. All of that felt really exciting to me and more accessible than any generation previously, because I was, in 1997, I was 13. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a bit more money and was coming into, a little bit more money as a teenager, and the games were cheaper, so it just felt like I could get my hands on games more easily. And that was exciting for me. It felt like the future was wide open.
Yeah, the only thing I really worried about was Nintendo, because I was a Nintendo guy, and the first party Nintendo stuff was already like, wow, like this is the only company that's making stuff like this. Sega and Sony had published a slew of Nintendo alikes that were mostly a total failure, and Nintendo, being an N64 owner, this right now is only the N64's second Christmas season here in December 1997, right? So a bunch of people don't even have N64s by the time this hits the shelf, or this issue hits the shelf, right? So it's kind of a weird time for Nintendo, because we're already getting Dreamcast and PS2 details.
Yeah.
And yet N64 is really just kind of hitting its stride. Also, no disc, no network. Yeah, there'd been a lot of rumors about those systems, coming with the 64DD that never came. No Squaresoft, barely any RPGs, as we talked about. I don't even remember Quest 64 coming out. So you're sitting here going like, okay, where are the RPG? Like, what is this going to look like? Games are $70, $80, $90. And like, is Nintendo going to get left behind here? Was something that was occurring to me, and I was trying to like, no, bad thoughts, go away. Even though, we'll see its relative standing here. Like, I wasn't afraid that Nintendo was going to die, but it definitely did feel like the first real, if Nintendo doesn't nail this jump to a next generation.
And it was sort of like the sign that they weren't infallible, right? Like through the NES and Game Boy and Super NES eras, like it felt like Nintendo was invincible. They had basically rebuilt the, games industry in North America. And it just felt like they could do whatever they wanted. And that hubris got to them and led to them making some poor decisions, right? And so you were seeing the consequences of that, and you were seeing Sony sort of like disrupting the market with the PlayStation. But that to me was exciting. It was like, I love Nintendo, and Nintendo's the only, company that I've always bought the console for. Like I do have all of the PlayStations, but I came to the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4 late. Like I only got my PlayStation 4 like maybe 2 years before the PS5 came out. Whereas Nintendo, it was always like I was always getting them kind of as soon as I could get my hands on them. And that's because even back in the Nintendo 64 era, when I could see that like, the PlayStation was doing things that excited me more, Nintendo was still Nintendo. And a Nintendo console was always worth owning because it was the place you could play those Nintendo games. And that to me was always like, Nintendo's always going to put out great stuff. And if they put out a console and they're the only one who puts out games for it, that's still going to be enough to justify the cost for me. And then to have Sony offering this sort of like open platform, what seemed like an open platform for, like courting a lot of interesting developers, just felt like a good situation, a good like environment for, I don't know. It's just, I guess like, I hate to say it, but it's sort of that capitalist free market idea of like, Nintendo having this like closed ecosystem, and then Sony coming in and being like, hey, we've got this open free market. Come make great games. We'll publish them. We'll put them out for cheap. You'll sell a lot of copies. And it kind of worked. But then, the PlayStation 2 is even bigger. And then, of course, the hubris caught up to them, and the PS3, their third console, really struggled. And so, there's a bit of a cycle there that in hindsight, the Nintendo 64's mistakes were sort of the first sign of that. Like look at the Xbox, and then the 360 was huge. And then I like the Xbox X1 S Series X that came next. I don't even know what it's called. And that was their
Yeah.
third console. And something about that third console, where these developers and these brands sort of lose their way. And then Nintendo 64 was the first sign of that. But PlayStation being launched at that time and coming out sooner, having the big franchises, and then launching and relaunching big franchises like Metal Gear Solid, having all the fighting games, launching Gran Turismo, like all of that happening while Nintendo was sort of like losing its luster, I think helped save this perception that like, oh, was the video game boom just like a blip? And Nintendo didn't really save video games. They just sort of like created a bubble and now it's going away. It was like, no, look at now Sony's picking that up and they're expanding that market in ways that shows that video games are good. It's not Nintendo. It's like video games that people want.
All right, well, it is time to look at and then open up the cover. If you're not already a member of FunFactor Ultra, getting ad-free episodes, getting bonus episodes, getting to listen live, watch live as we record this on stream, hang tight through the break. When we come back, we will flip through Next Generation, issue 36, and the review, which I'm going to slow roll a little bit. Welcome back to Fun Factor, where two old gamers review old video game magazine reviews. Of course, we want you to review us. Do we get a full 5.0 in Fun Factor? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and we'll read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air. Aiden, Next Generation. It's funny because I wanted to come back to this before the end of the season. I wanted to come back to Next Generation. There was a big run of issues from like 15 through like low 30s where a lot of the clean and professional look started to kind of give way to more like directly copying Edge magazine. Not that that wasn't a whole lot of borrowing to begin with, but like it started to look more like regular other video game magazines, right? Like it was still Next Generation, but there was more like subheads and jutting out text, a lot bolder colors, a lot more focus on, you know, big bold characters and stuff. And so you kind of went, okay, like, and they switched paper stocks and like, you know, it looked more like a regular magazine, even though the content wasn't necessarily worse.
Well, it's interesting because I think that this was a time where we were seeing the other gaming mag sort of like moving towards what Next Gen was doing. And so you were almost having, you know, like the EGMs and the game players were sort of like quote unquote growing up, and Next Gen was recognizing like, hey, we kind of got to get in on that game players audience a little bit. And so it was sort of like a homogenization period for games magazines. And then, you know, it wasn't that long before we were sort of moving into the era where magazines started to decline, right? And the internet started sort of taking over. I guess, you know, we're still several years away from that, but I do think that this homogenization is maybe a sign of what's to come.
Yeah, for sure. But for now, right, this issue is kind of the herald of some of those things, right? But this cover, very clean. This cover, you know, again, lots of white, red, silver. Like a lot of magazines do this for December or holiday issues, right? But it's really, really stark. And then just the game machine of the year. You have this outlet and this plug, and it looks like a computer plug, not like a console plug.
That was my first thought. I was like, that drives me crazy because that's clearly not a console like plug. It doesn't have a power source, right? They were all big bricks with like a power source or, you know, like a down converter or whatever. So I look at that and I'm like, that does not look like a console game plug, which
and it,
you know,
it sure isn't. Flip the and it's even got the game machine of the year and then the little arrow to be like, oh. Yeah, what are we doing? So yeah, you want to flip over just, you know, inside. The year of the PC?
Oh my gosh.
What?
Yeah.
Got the classic PC speakers that many people had. You know, there was the later Altec Lansings, but these were the, you know, the big gray box, Intel inside, and then, you know, you've got the consoles there on the screen. PCs have never been able to match consoles in the most demanding areas, fast action games and arcade conversions. That's not true anymore. Da, 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 da. So yeah, this is a console-focused magazine declaring the PC, or at least like clickbait question mark declaring the PC, the console of the year in the year after the launch of the Nintendo 64 and the year of the PlayStation absolutely dominating the console market.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good time for PC gaming. They're not wrong, but I'm curious to see kind of how they justify this, because it's funny. I wouldn't necessarily say that arcade conversions and fast action games were what were making the PC interesting in 1997 either. At least not what I was into. I associated it previously with stuff like Doom. There's Quake around this time, but I'm thinking Diablo, I'm thinking Warcraft 2, I'm thinking Baldur's Gate, which are not kind of what they're selling here. So that's interesting.
Right, but like a Quake wouldn't have even been possible, right? Like we're getting some ports now both directions, right? Like Quake is big enough, Doom is big enough. We're seeing these console ports. People want to play these games, even the people who don't have PC games. That was never, I don't want to say never a thing, but like people with Super Nintendos are not like, oh my gosh, I have to get platformers that are PC native ported to Super Nintendo, right? Like that just wasn't happening.
I mean, we did whole episodes on Quake and Doom on consoles. And like to varying results, right? Like Doom on the Super Nintendo was not good, but Quake on the Saturn was a bit of a miracle port. And so that there is history both ways of how that transition can happen, but also showing like computers were good for gaming. And it's maybe people weren't doing the types of games that were appearing on consoles, but there was a lot of good stuff. Like the idea that like the PCs weren't great for games pre 1997 is just not accurate.
Well, but it's and I think this is really more about the possibilities, right? We're starting to see online games and going, wow, the power here is unbelievable. If you have Ultima, this is a little bit before Ultima Online, but you're starting to see the earliest MMOs, the earliest multiplayer games, like that Interstate 76 that we looked at last issue was kind of like almost like a proto Rocket League type situation where it's like car combat, not car sports, but that was the thing where like we're stripping it down to absolutely nothing, because ultimately if you can get fast, fun internet play, almost nothing else matters, right? Like that can be a game in and of itself. And the number of people who are actually having fast, fun Twitch experiences on PC were like minimal at this point, but it was so exciting, and it was such a change in what's possible from even a year before. I think that really kind of was the hook here. But let's go ahead and flip one more page. This is Volume 3, it actually said on the cover. So we're beginning Next Generation's third year, right? Issue 36, December 1997. 190 pages, 31 games reviewed. Number of systems reviewed for 6, N64, PlayStation, Saturn, PC, Macintosh, and arcade. Masthead, just a couple of highlights, but they're pretty interesting highlights. Kathy Liu, managing editor. Her name caught my eye because she was not one of the Imagine Media / Future US regulars like Patrick Bagata and Neil West. Turns out that's because she was only at Next Generation for a little over a year, in between stints at like 3 different Mac-focused outlets. She then freelanced for a bunch of tech mags, as well as held the Cool Inventions columnist gig at National Geographic Kids for like 8 years. Hey. Yeah, pretty sweet gig.
That would be fun. That would be a fun place to work.
And then in 2007, she became the editorial group manager and researcher for Rick Steves Europe.
Oh, yeah, based Rick Steves.
Yeah, I had never heard of Rick Steves.
Oh, man. I actually did not like his travel guides compared to like Lonely Planet, but he has redeemed himself in my eyes.
Okay.
Cool guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Kathy Liu has held that job at that magazine ever since.
All right. In media, that is remarkable. That's a run in media. Wow.
I put in my script here, the steady gig in travel writing is like the ultimate dream for every freelancer. If you can bank 20 years of travel writing, like come on. Oh my gosh. The other person I want to look at, editor-in-chief Chris Charla. In my formative years, Charla was the other Chris of game players, he was the writing second fiddle to then editor Chris Slate. But Charla had a great run at Next Generation and was the launch editor of IGN.com. Like a lot of writers who made the jump to editor in that company, he then also made the jump to game dev. So in 2001, he joined Backbone Entertainment, which mostly did like updates and ports of arcade and console classics. Moved up from a production manager role to executive producer. Backbone then merged with another developer to create Foundation 9 Entertainment. Charla became their first director of biz dev and then VP of biz dev. And in September 2010, he joined Xbox as the portfolio director for Xbox Live Arcade, then director of ID at Xbox, their indie publishing program. And he just kept getting promoted and promoted and promoted while basically doing the same stuff, leading the indie and third-party development portfolio, teams, and direction. After 15 years, Chris Charla is now the GM of portfolio and programs at Microsoft. And he's on the advisory board of the Game Developers Conference. But what's really cool is that he never stopped writing. He makes zines. His incredibly strange games zines, which are often found floating around at GDCs, are super freaking cool. I have the link in our script. I don't know if you want to get to that. I can also pop it in the chat. Sorry, I'm kind of blindsiding you with this. This is one from 2011, and since hey, we're a magazine show, I throw it at you. So they're super cool, and they reveal just how connected to the indie game scene Charla has been throughout his super successful tenure at Microsoft. This is not an interview from this magazine. There's a 2023 interview Charla did for the 10th anniversary of ID at Xbox, and I want you to read this an excerpt for me. This is at the Xbox.com site, and the interviewer is asking him if there's like a pantheon of ID at Xbox games that today's developers should see as inspiration.
There absolutely is, and should be. Now, I'll just caveat that by saying that after any discussion like this, you'd probably mix this up all over the place. But right now, I would say I'd put in Tunic. I'd put in an Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs. I'd put in Cuphead, and then I'd probably put in Ark Survival Evolved. It's a great example of a studio that started very quickly and worked really quickly to put something together and have had really sustainable long-term success. I would put the entire Kemco JRPG line, which we now have as a bundle, because I just think it's so cool that they've achieved that level of success. Oh, there's just so many. It's really tricky. Hades. Rocket League started life in the ID program. Ultimate Chicken Horse needs to be on there someplace. There's so many games, it gets really, really hard. That's what's so fun about these kinds of questions, is that you can debate them endlessly and end up with, 2,000 gods in your pantheon.
Yeah, Tunic, Hades, Cuphead, Rocket League, and Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs, and Ultimate Chicken Horse. So that shows you just how diverse Charla's tastes really are, and how broad a net 10, 15 years of Xbox scouting out and I literally IDing and promoting indie developers and their games in Xbox really are. And oh wait, what's right here in the table of contents right there on screen? Page 76, Which Way to the Underground, a huge feature about the advent of the indie game scene, which is so new they don't even know it's going to be called indie and not underground. And of course I want to, before the old heads scream, like, yes, of course, obviously games were almost entirely indie for like the first 18 years of their existence, right? But we're talking about a post-console, post-Nintendo DRM world where you have to be a publisher to get stuff published, but indie console games, indie mass market video games in a retail space in a way that just didn't exist throughout the 90s. Oh well, hey, now there's starting to be some indie developers creeping in at the edges of PlayStation and Saturn and PC and eventually Xbox.
And like Xbox was so important because Xbox Live Arcade went after those games and gave them a distribution platform. And that's what like was missing, right? Like you had like shareware and like BBSs and files just being traded online. And then there was like nothing really. And then Xbox came in trying to, give a place, a home for these smaller games made by indie studios. And now we have places like itch.io. We have ways for developers to distribute their games themselves. And so we're kind of like coming back. It's almost that full circle of developers being able to partner with small publishers or publish themselves, which I think is really important for that movement.
For sure. And hey, before we get any further, I think it's time for the flip through. Yeah, so hey, very first page, you're already on it. Disk contents, right? And as we're talking about, the internet already changing things, right? They're going to go ahead and assume that most of their readers have PCs, and they're going to want demos of such games as Daikatana, Grim Fandango.
Hey, okay, the hype for Daikatana was huge.
It was.
We laugh at it in hindsight. But anyway, read John Romero's book. Doom Guy, very good.
Yeah, for sure. Mac, Quake, Postal, Galapagos, all for Mac, right? They've got Mac demos in there. That's cool. And there's some stuff in here. There's audio interviews. It sounds like you'll see and hear the people making news in the industry, right? Then they've also got software for Heat.net, which we talked about. We covered in an earlier episode. Tic Tac Chat, of course, absolutely. Yeah. Vital software you have to have on your PC. Oh my god! Like really?
No.
Tic Tac Chat? Okay, no.
I have to say,
that there are people in our audience who literally did meet somebody on like Yik Yak or something horrifying.
Yeah,
or DS PictoChat.
It happens, and good for them. I met my wife in high school. Like I have no experience meeting people on Tic Tac Chat, but I do like this because all of the screenshots are circles. Like CDs.
Yeah. They're discs, right. But we can't. There's so much in here. Let's jump ahead to page 10 and 11. 2-page spread. The most popular woman in the world. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, man, this is another one of these where this is a gigantic interview. It's huge. It spans, I think, 7 pages. It's huge, and tons of these, quotes. It's really funny because what we basically have here is, a small British developer, and as they kind of tell the story here, Core Design's Jeremy Smith, Lara Croft as a character so quickly outpaced everything about the game Tomb Raider, it wasn't even out yet, right?
Yeah.
So let me see. I'm trying to even find, right? Okay, so on page it's 12 in our copy here, right? So they talk about the game was in development well before they actually landed on the character, which I think a lot of people know. And they ask, so Lara's really just 4 years old? And he's like, yeah, but there were 4 or 5 versions of Lara kicking around before the Lara you see now. When did you first realize Tomb Raider was going to be a big hit? When did you get the first hint that Lara was going to have a life of her own outside the game? Funnily enough, it actually all began with the Financial Times, Britain's top financial newspaper. It's a very serious, sober, broadsheet newspaper, hardly the place you might expect Lara to be discovered. But Eidos had announced its latest financial results, which were great results, and so the Financial Times had decided to put Eidos on the front page. They'd been given some Eidos information and artwork, and they decided to use Lara to illustrate their news piece. So all of a sudden, there's Lara in your face on the front page of the Financial Times. Next Generation goes, what happened next? Then the Sunday Telegraph phoned us and asked us to do a piece on Lara and Tomb Raider, ended up putting a big picture of Lara on her motorbike on the cover of the Sunday Edition. And so this just is then that the Face magazine, who always put a face on us cover, rang us up and said, we don't know if this will work. When we put Lara Croft. So, like, this is just this huge media snowball before the game even hits the shelves of newspapers and magazines just seeing Lara Croft and going like, oh my God, like just put this on the cover. Just this. Give us more this.
And like on page 13, as part of this interview, Next Generation asks, they say, cock it all up. You say you're worried that by adding too much detail and trying to cover all the bases, inevitably you'll make a mistake somewhere and turn people off of her. But it's been reported that Lara is soon to be releasing a record with Dave Stewart, half of Eurythmics. How can you reconcile a desire to keep her personality low profile while releasing a pop record? So like this was a huge push to like not just make her a video game character, but to make her an icon, like just a pop icon.
Right.
Like following in like the Britney Spears mold, I suppose, but even more than that, because then they talk about her like, you know, being in the movies, right?
Yes.
But they don't say like, hey, we're going to make a Tomb Raider movie. They say, quote, she is a movie star waiting to happen. And so like, there's this idea, of course, of like, you know, they talk about this a lot in interviews for Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within, and how they created Aki Ross. And the actress was a digital actress, and this idea that she was going to be in other movies. Like she wasn't just a character created for Final Fantasy Spirits Within, but somebody that just like another actor would appear in other movies, in other roles, playing different characters. And you can see how they're trying to do the same thing here with Lara Croft. Not the model that they have in this photo shoot, but like Lara Croft as a fictional character being Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or whatever. And like Lara Croft has obviously cemented like an enormous place in like pop culture. But you know, we still keep getting just reboots of Tomb Raider. It's not like it managed to like coalesce into this enormous media IP outside of the video games.
Yeah, and this is really interesting to me because there's so much to unpack, and we're probably not the two best people to unpack it. Next Generation asks, but here's where the controversy starts. Could Lara really have been a male character? Isn't her success in this predominantly male teenage audience largely because she's an unfeasibly proportioned, scantily clad, pouting babe? And Jeremy goes, personally, I agree, but I'm sure some of my colleagues in the industry would want to argue the point. I think if Lara had been a guy, well, Tomb Raider was a great game, so you can't say that Tomb Raider was a success just because it featured a bird with big tits. But could a male character be as successful outside of the game? I don't know. And like, I mean, it's just astonishing to me that you would even assert. And like, okay, part of this is the novelty of having a centralized female action character in a game, right? That is a novelty. That is some of the juice that makes the Financial Times and the Sunday Telegraph be like, whoa, what is this? She's so cool. She's such a badass. This hasn't been done, right? But also like there's, no male video game characters have been breakout hits.
Yeah.
Like Mario, Sonic, basically every Earthworm Jim, every basically video game character, Link, you know, I mean, a million cartoons have already been launched. Movies have already been made around video game characters at this point, like several dozens, right? There's been crossover here. The Ninja Turtles were freaking everywhere, you know, and that was a comic book, but it was also a video game, and it was also a movie, and it was also a TV show. The idea that we have one breakaway video game character who's a lady, and it's like, wow, you know, it's probably just because she's a lady. Like, if that was the cheat code, why weren't all video games ladies? Like, what?
Well, and then it's funny because Naughty Dog comes along, you know, however many years later, 10 years later, and like sort of soft reboots Tomb Raider with Nathan Drake and Uncharted and makes him like that kind of slick talking guy. Because I think like, you know, there's obviously like a lot of baked in misogyny here, but also like even accepting their framing pop culture stuff that resonated with teenage boys was not driven by women actors or singers. You know, Britney Spears wasn't popular with boys, right? Like,
Right.
Coyote Ugly, the movie, was not popular with boys, right? Like, and it just like, it kind of misunderstood, I think. Like, boys were objectifying women like Lara Croft, but they weren't like idolizing or in like internalizing those characters in the way that they were with, you know, whoever else, hockey players or, you know, athletes at the time, or, you know, Lord of the Rings, with when the movies came out, wanting to be Legolas and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really know what they were going for here, other than just kind of like beating around the bush that, like, you know, she's like a hottie and like looks good in ads. So it's just like, what did they really expect to happen here? Were you trying to make a sex symbol, or were you trying to make like a serious cultural, you know, entity that performed across all, like, many different spectrums, from like sex appeal to, you know, acting or music or whatever else they wanted to put her in. It's just a very, very strange thing, and it just kind of reeks as very desperate. Like, even just like looking at like the pictures that they put in here, like, look at what is he doing on the left there? He's doing like the boob grab thing, right?
Yeah,
and like
I think it's
his facial expression here, like. And then like the quote under that funny, facial expression on the right, people ask us if we're going to do a nude Lara. And of course not. We're in the video game business. Like, you're trying to sell her as a sex symbol, but then you're like berating people for asking about that and saying, but we're going to make her a pop star, and then making that
she's going to be a pop star. She's going to be in movies. We would never do that. Meanwhile, have you seen the ads in British video game magazines?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Like,
look at
just
this quote.
For video games.
You can't say Tomb Raider was a success just because it featured a big bird with big tits. Like, I just like, I don't know. Do you trust somebody who's dropping sound bites like that to like respectfully create, you know, an ecosystem around a fictional woman that empowers her as like a cultural entity? Like, come on.
Yeah, there is an interesting factoid in here though. Right after of course, we're never going to do a nude Lara. As for doing good, I think the Lara phenomenon's been tremendously positive. In Japan, the majority of Tomb Raider registration cards returned are from women, and this is unheard of. So you can say that Tomb Raider has encouraged more women to play games. Lara has also brought the game industry attention from a much wider audience of media. For Core and for the industry as a whole, this has to be a good thing. What Lara's managed to do is get into people's offices, get into people's homes, and spread the idea of video games to an audience that normally would never encounter them. You know, and it kind of goes on to talk about, you know, computer illiterate people or whatever. But it's kind of presaging the Bayonetta effect, right? Yeah. Like, these developers were definitely thinking. I mean, I actually remember a preview interview where they were saying, because Lara was an Indiana Jones ripoff to begin with, to the point that he had a hat and a whip.
In the like in the interview here, he says, like, quote, "She's the female Indiana Jones." Right. So like, but yeah,
what I was going to say was, it was kind of driven. I remember one of the developers saying, they were like, hey, you know, part of that with a third person action view, they were like, hey, well, if you're going to spend this whole game looking at somebody's bum, why wouldn't it be a nice female bum? Right. So like the objectification was already baked in. Right.
And but like, then, that's where the like contradiction comes in too, because it's like, is she a, like, I think the angle of like, we wanted an action game. We wanted to make female Indiana Jones. We wanted to, you know, like, make a game that was appealing to people who might not be drawn to these games typically, or don't see themselves in games. But it's like, you're making her a woman, but then she should be a woman because you can look at her ass the whole time. Like, those two things just don't add up. Like, those are two contradictory reasons for doing this. And I think it would have been so much more effective to say, like, this is a new hero for a new generation. You know, men have got to have all the fun. And now, you know, we want to show that there's so much more that a hero can be than what you've seen in whatever other games.
Yeah, and I think what's happening here is they stumbled into it. And Tempest Strife in the chat goes, "As a girl, I wouldn't have been interested in the game if not for a female protagonist as a female identifying gamer." And there's also something to, as a character, Lara having ownership and respecting the power of her sexuality, despite using IDOS using that to sell. And Tempest Strife is presumably still typing. But I thought that's exactly a really salient point where he's talking about their intentions, and then he's talking about the reaction, and you don't have control over the reaction, and they're more surprised than anybody to be getting back registration cards from Japan. It's like, wait, hold on. Like, it's women buying this game.
We have hindsight too, right? And so like, part of the show is trying to understand what they're saying at the time. The other part of it is like the framing of like this interview, right? Like the fact that they have these sort of skeezy photos of this guy makes it feel exploitative to me. And then the photos of Lara aren't photos of her from the game, right?
Right. They're the official model.
Like,
right. So they're at a trade show.
Yeah.
They hired a model to be, and they've named her the official model. Also, the guy is freaking looming over her.
It's weird.
And
like
weird...
look at the lead, like the lead. Lara Croft is huge. Like this is like next gen. Like we've talked about how next gen was supposed to be this sort of like grown up, mature gaming magazine, but like Lara Croft is huge. Like it's just such a clear, tacky double entendre. You know, and it follows up. It says, and we're not just making a cheap joke. Like the way that even this article just kind of sexualizes her and objectifies her takes so much away from like what Tempest Strife was saying in chat. And I think what we've seen from Lara Croft as the franchise has gotten older is that like her, you know, owning her sexuality in the game is, and as a character is an important part of that, but they didn't know how to sell that, because you put a skeezy guy in a suit in front of a microphone and he just said like he's worried about her being a pop star, and that might make her seem, you know, like reduce the appeal of her character. But it's like, I don't know. It's hard to articulate, I guess, but it's just like, there's, you know, what we've seen of the character and where we've seen sort of like culture go and retreat, and it's just hard to place an interview like this and not feel like they were like, oh yeah, we got this hot babe, she's got boobs, and we can finally render boobs in a game, and this is going to be huge. And then like you say, then they're like, oh whoa, wait, actually it's women and girls that are being drawn to this as new players, not horny guys. I mean, I guess the horny guys too. I don't know. It's just weird. It's weird.
It is weird. It is weird. Can you actually, I don't know if you can bring up Aiden. I just sent a link in the chat because we are freelance journalists and we are hardwired to find a news peg to all of the content we make. Here we are. Sophie Turner, the actress probably best known as Sansa Stark on Game of Thrones, will be portraying Lara Croft in a new Amazon Tomb Raider series. Promotional photos of her were just released. And I quote tweeted it on the FunFactor account. See, like totally impractical outfit. These sunglasses would be terrible for raiding tombs in. Which is
I know this isn't a Tomb Raider. I think that the Sophie Turner stuff looks like amazing. She's great.
Yes.
But like, I think too, like we've also seen, this is like turning into a Tomb Raider episode, but we've also seen such a like range of what they've tried to do with Lara. And there was like the reboot from 10 years ago where she was younger and it was like her origin story. She I don't know, she gets stranded in the forest or whatever. And she's supposed to be this like innocent young teenager who's suffering all this trauma, but like it really leans into like a lot of the Ludo narrative dissonance that I associate with games of that time. But like she's taking people out with a bow, she's blowing people up, she like murders like a ton of people. But then there's a scene, if I'm remembering correctly, then there's a scene where like there's a story reason for her to kill somebody, and then that's what causes her tons of trauma. So it wasn't like the like 38 other like deaths she's caused. it was like it had to be tied into the story beat. And so like I think that like in some ways trying to tie everything back to Lara Croft as a character and say Lara Croft can be all of these different things sort of misses the point of what makes a rich, interesting character in the first place. Like, let her be a badass explorer, right? Like,
Sure.
do we need to see her in other things? Do we need her singing pop songs? Do we need to see her origin stories as like a, you know, tender youth or whatever? I don't know. It's just, they keep trying to,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting. And then we'll see here, speaking of the LA Times, Sophie Turner says her version will not be a, quote, sex bombshell. It's about her and her story and what drives her rather than what so many people also love about her, which is how hot she is in the games and movies, Turner revealed. And I think you're right. And also in terms of like, you know, obviously having, you know, 3 kids who are, you know, adult or nearly so, and teenagers, and, you know, like there are people who are pretty much hardwired badasses, right? And there are people who are tender and then become badasses, and there are people who are badasses and then everything falls apart, right? Like it's not always a 1-to-1, right? And so it's fascinating because, you know, she's a rich girl, right? Like that's kind of like her story too. So I'm really curious to see how they play this and what they do, what does drive her exactly, because what people have enjoyed about her has never been her motivations, but about her actions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how much are they going to retcon what we know of the character, and how much are they going to build off what we know of the character? Because I think there's a lot of potential meat on the bone, and then there's also potential if they just, like, you know, mostly crumple it up and start over and go, hey, like, what if we get from point A to point B in a new way, or prequel, you know, origin story to now in a new way, or because they're not really clear on when in the timeline this is.
Yeah. And like, I also just don't need a Tomb Raider timeline, you know, like, just let her do cool stuff. Like, I think that, like, and I guess this ultimately comes like back to why I think the idea of her being in movies as like Lara Croft, the actor or whatever, is like, I don't need like narrative framing excuses for James Bond to come back from the dead or whatever, right? Like, I don't need
an iconic hero
to understand how
Conan the Barbarian,
why Hyrule all of a sudden is covered in water. Like, tell me, like, give me a reason in the story and have that as part of a story. But I think in like games like Tomb Raider, maybe you have a bit of a loose ongoing story, but realistically, I just want that action, right? It's just like, just let the game itself be the story. And so, like, you know, when you go into something that's a more linear style of storytelling, or has less of the like player agency, then you have to tell a different type of story, right? And maybe the games are more about like what Lara Croft does, and the show is about who Lara Croft is, and like maybe that is a better way to approach it. And maybe the story of young Lara and her origin story and the trauma she got from killing somebody would have worked better as a TV show than a game where they had to like create conflict through violence, and I lit people on fire with a Molotov cocktail, but then 3 hours later she like then all of a sudden has a conflict or is upset about killing somebody, even though she's like lit people on fire until they die. And so like reconciling, oh, this is an action game, with, oh, we're going to try to tell a story that's like really baked into like the human experience, is just really challenging, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, this is our pitch to the Amazon showrunners. Hire us. We will write stories for you. We do have to move on. So much stuff to get to. We're not even close. We're so far in already. So page 20, news. Video game industry loses one of its pioneers. The tragic death of Gunpei Yokoi, inventor of the Game Boy, Virtual Boy, but also all the way back to, as they detail here, Nintendo's Ultra Hand, like when they started first branching out from just playing cards into toys. Gunpei Yokoi was the guy making those toys, right? So,
well, he was like an industrial designer, which is why the Game Boy was so amazing, right? It was function. Function was at kind of its core, and knowing, and if you understand sort of his background, it makes a lot of sense why it was the way it was.
It does, and you just linked Aiden last week in our Discord in the Games and Gaming channel, the Slow-Mo Guys YouTube channel. I just put this in the chat. This link, Virtual Boy at 1,000,000 frames per second, and I'm our resident Virtual Boy sicko. You can see my fully functioning Virtual Boy right here. I understood intellectually the concept of red LEDs and rotating mirrors. Seeing that device taken apart and how it works, seeing the LEDs, it's one line of LEDs, and the rotating mirrors, so it's like refreshing it like just an absolutely astonishing rate, and then the mirrors are positioned so you're constantly getting this. It's just one straight line of LEDs going on and off and on and off and on and off in sequence really, really fast, and that's what's forming the screen. So like at one point they take the camera and go like wiggle, 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 wiggle. And what looks just like a straight up and down line that's like maybe kind of lights are going off and on, they replay it and you can see, oh, there's the picture. Like there it is. Just if you just like shake the camera like this, you know, and like, wow, like seeing that in action, it's like how brilliant do you have to be to even come up with that
to come up with that idea? Yeah. And like one of the cool things in like the retro gaming space is we're seeing a lot of those technologies and those ideas coming back. And so something that CRT monitors did really well was having low image retention, because again, it was only drawing one line of pixels, right? One scan line at a time.
Yep.
From left to right down the screen, and then it would start again. And it does it so fast that our eyes see it as a solid image, whereas like LCD monitors draw the whole image at once. But we're starting to see implementation of like the same idea of drawing the lines from left to right, one scan line at a time down the screen on LCDs, and it's creating this CRT like response time, which is just cool. It's like I love the idea that like Yokoi was thinking way back then how to get around technical limitations, hardware limitations, and using kind of creative industrial engineering to solve these problems that people are now looking back on and being like, oh, that was actually really clever. And it applies to our beautiful 4K HDR 240 hertz monitors. It's really cool.
So next, the other page, just want to zoom past it. Basically, future of data storage. Oh, wow. Like we're researching how to increase storage density by using holograms and lasers. And like, it's so funny. Currently, scientists can store up to 48 megabytes per cubic centimeter in a prototype system. This is far short of the 10 gigabytes per cubic centimeter they're shooting for. But it's like, the whole thing is talking about how we're running up against the physical limits of magnetic storage, which
I think
is obviously
like we were, I guess. But Ty, I think we could become rich if we take this idea and like sell it to Sam Altman.
Yes, good.
Holograms.
100%.
Have you ever thought of storing data in holograms?
Ooh.
We make up numbers, and then we ask for $398 billion or whatever, and they give it to us, and then it doesn't matter if we deliver our hologram storage.
So outside of the fact that magnetic hard drives rapidly outpaced this, and then solid state drives got invented, and zoom in on this sidebar here. This little tiny sidebar, totally unrelated. PlayStation 2 speculation. The first reliable rumors have surfaced regarding Sony's successor to PlayStation. Specs are alleged to include a 2 to 300 megahertz CPU, 14 to 24 megabytes of main RAM. That's a big swing, man. 2 to 4 megabytes texture RAM, 1 megabyte sound RAM, standard true color high res graphics, vast array of Z buffering. Who knows? Be sure to check Next Generation online at www.next-generation.com for daily updates as the story develops. So again, we're starting to get PlayStation 2 specs. That's all like that. Again, 200 to 300 megahertz, 14 to 24 megabytes of RAM. Big swings here, but clearly PlayStation 2 stuff is starting to come out. Also, this is one of the first, that we've run across. Not just, hey, there's a website you can go to, but hey, this is quick breaking news. You're just not going to get this fast enough to hit it month per month. Go to our website if you want to get the actual news.
If you need to know today whether there will be 2 or 4 or 3 megabytes of texture RAM, check out www.
And then skip forward another page. Another note, same here. Dural team gets to work. And what the Dural is the Sega's arcade board that's the literal one-to-one with the Dreamcast, right? This is their next arcade board. They're sending up, and actually in issue 35, I waffled right to the last minute on whether we were going to do 35 or 36. They actually talk about, yeah, cool, these are the rumored specs of the Dural board, and it's, again, one-to-one with the final specs of the Dreamcast, pretty much.
Yeah,
so
this somebody leaked.
Yeah, well, they're sending dev kits to developers, right? They are asking to hear, this is our arcade machine. What they haven't, and they've said, yeah, our next console will be something like this, but it's actually the Dural port, like it's literally just the Dreamcast board.
Yeah.
So that's why the Arcade Perfect ports were literal, because it was like it's literally the same hardware.
Yeah. Yeah.
Moving on very quickly, page 28.
Hello.
Crash is back, and he's all pumped up and ready to rumble. And I don't even know how this works as a concept, advertising wise.
What was the pitch meeting, and what were the alternative like?
Yeah. But hey, we're gonna balance it out a little bit here. We got some beefcake to go with our cheesecake from earlier.
That one guy in the middle is so much more vascular than everybody else. The rest of them are like so smooth, and he's got like veins for days.
Yeah, the roids just popping out. But then we have Crash. I guess Crash is the same color.
Yeah,
as the
that must have been the
guys,
idea.
Sprayed brown.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah,
Looking
that just
good.
struck me as like, this is eye-catching, and then you go, wait, what's the joke? What's the punchline? Like, and he's all pumped up and ready to rumble. You're waiting for the like weird pun about bodybuilding or something, and it just doesn't come. Again, super quick. Jump one more page, page 30. Sorry, 2 more pages. Yeah, there we go. Joyriding. Just brief note, talking about the launch of the PGL, Professional Gamer League. Early esports idea. I remember there was a lot of talk about this, just like, wow, as a concept, right? Professional Gaming League. It was a thing for like a year, I think.
It was ahead of its time, maybe, but
way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Last little bit here before we get to kind of the meat of 2 big features. Page 38, Retro View, which again, I love the regular retro features that have been popping up in magazines, right? And here we go. What a tagline / pitch. The Virtual Boy of the 80s, the Vectrex. And I'm sure there are Vectrex heads out there just, screaming about this comparison. But yeah, a vector graphics system, kind of legendary British system. It's very funny for me. I liked it best because this spells out this apparently urban myth about the concept, which was like, oh yeah, according to the myth, an Asian businessman offered General Consumer Electronics president Ed Krakauer a warehouse full of monitors that had been built for medical use at bargain prices while he was on a trip to Hong Kong. Krakauer, who supposedly bought the monitors for less than it cost to manufacture them, had no idea what he'd do with them, so he hired engineers to design a game console around them. Despite what an interesting bit of history this story makes, it's totally untrue. So we lead with this story that apparently is just completely false, but it's very fun that this myth sprung up around such a unique piece of engineering and going like, well, how did they come up with he must have gotten the monitors for dirt cheap.
And like the fact that like they needed overlays and stuff, like just kind of adds to the idea that he had this like, this asset that he just had to figure out how to sell. But I don't mind the Virtual Boy comparison. Like, it was a way of thinking about like different ways of displaying and experiencing video games. I've never actually played a Vectrex. I think somebody I know had one, but
I saw one being played. I'm almost positive, but I was like 5.
Yeah.
And I don't think, like, I knew it was somehow different than like the ones that plugged into the TV, but I couldn't have explained to you how. And like I see it, I'm like, I think that was it, but like I couldn't even tell you where it was. Just one of those like real dim, like two-frame memories of childhood where you're like, yeah, I think
that's similar to me. Like, I swear I've seen one in person, but like I couldn't tell you how or why or where.
Vectrex has reemerged in the 1990s as one of the most desirable collector's items for retro game fanatics. There's even a new Vectrex cartridge available over the internet that has 70 games, 50 games more than the number GCE published while its console was still in the market. And guess what? Just like the Virtual Boy, where you can get all of the games ever made, plus homebrew games, ports, translations, there is a sick Street Fighter 2 Turbo port that's just called Hyper Fighting to avoid the lawyers.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, like there's a bunch of amazing stuff online about the Virtual Boy. People are still actively developing constantly for it. You can get cool e-ink cartridges that you can like switch what game is on there. Like
yes, friend of the show, Eric Lehman from Retrograde Amnesia podcast was showing it off, and e-ink screen. So when you load up a game, it shows the card art on it. Really cool.
Cool. All right.
One thing that I wanted to say, though, is we were talking earlier about like words or terms that sort of outlasted their origins. The fact that like retro gaming was the term for this back in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, and it still is, right? It's still just retro gaming. It's like you're just playing on old hardware and people liked it. And there's this idea that, you know, in the 90s at this time, people might have felt like, you know, oh, it's all about new technology. Like, who cares about old games? They were just inferior. I think we've come to recognize that that was wrong. But it's nice to see, like you said, people covering it from that angle, even back in the sort of mid to late 90s.
Yeah. Can you jump ahead to page 77?
77. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to really do a flip through here.
Yeah. We're going to flip as fast as our little fingers can flip. Oh, yeah, there we go.
I skipped it.
Yeah. So, which way to the underground? And now I don't know, but first of all, I'm going to guess that Neil West and/or somebody at Edge.
I was going to say, did they like just straight up lift this feature from Edge? I bet they did.
I bet they did too.
Yeah,
I bet they did
100%.
Too. Because first of all, the whole joke here is that this is a map of the London Underground. Like, these are the symbols that you see: Tottenham Court Road, Leicester Square, Westminster. You know, this is just literally the London Underground, the subway system in London. I had no idea about this as a kid, and the whole premise rests entirely on being British.
Yeah. Like, I've been to a lot of these stations now, but that was as a, you know, person in my 20s who had traveled. Like, I wouldn't have understood this reference when I was a kid. So maybe, I guess, after I played Fallout. Was there a Fallout? Where was Fallout 3 set? It wasn't London.
Oh.
No, what am I thinking of? There was like a Fallout. Maybe I'm thinking of Hellgate, London. I'm thinking of Hellgate, London.
There you go.
Better left.
Yeah, so this is, and again, Chris Charla, who's the editor-in-chief of this magazine, and maybe this is lifted straight from Edge, maybe this is a collab, I don't know. And again, no bylines, as there aren't in Next Generation, outside of the specific columns, you know, the joyriding and arcade, they have some, but like the features and the reviews have no bylines. So when we think of the underground or independent spirit in the arts, the images that come to mind are probably of things controversial and daring. You know, so
Super Mario 64, Wolfenstein 3D.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so I don't know why. This is funny because, big production games like Mario 64 clearly illustrate there are games being produced in the mainstream that are well worth playing, but they don't have to be the only choice. And again, talking about history rhyming, we're in this space where they're going, hey, look, like, if you want to wait like 5 years for your new Nintendo console and your new Mario game and your new Zelda game, and then sit around kind of going, okay, do I even really want to spend $70 or $80 on any of these other games? Well, hey, guess what? There's this thriving indie scene bubbling up with new games, experimental games, cheap games, easy to acquire games. You can play dozens of them, right? Like, when everything is AAA and a big tentpole release and nothing really fits under the tentpole, you know, it's like, here we are 30 years ago. And this is already a phenomenon that they're identifying.
It is funny, though, that the screenshots here are of like some of the biggest games of all time, and then a Kenji Eno. Like, you know, like
Yeah, I forgot
It's
about
not
this, dude.
really like highlighting what we would think of as indie games. But I do think it's also like notable that the distribution method that would have worked for indie games at the time were these demo discs that came with magazines like
Yes.
this, right? Like that is how these games would have spread effectively. Like there was the internet, like that was starting to kind of like bubble up and become a little more mainstream for trading files and games and stuff. But like those demo discs were huge. But like this issue didn't even come with like, like the indie or the underground disc or whatever with like a bunch of like underground
it's all Daikatana
games
and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, again, it's Daikatana. It was like big releases. So it's kind of a funny article here. And they're talking about like the Net Eurosy, which was like the PlayStation development kit thing. So it's like
Sega Saturn Basic. I had no idea this existed. And this is great because it contradicts itself instantly. Another potential bright spot in the effort to create creative new designers on the console front is the upcoming Saturn Basic program. Though there are no plans to bring the system to the US, it may soon be possible to import a package designed to allow programmers to get back to their basic roots in making games for Saturn. Because of the lack of support from Sega of America, Saturn Basic does not look like the opportunity that Sony's Net Eurose is, but because it requires minimal programming now. So is it saying like literally, okay, cool, you can buy a thing that will let you program in Basic on the Sega Saturn with no first party support or distribution or anything? I have no idea why that would be a thing or what. I don't know. Why would you want to run basic games on
and how
Saturn?
would you like get them off? Like, is it like the old school, like you're just like typing in the basic code from the back of the magazine and executing it? Like it's funny. It's cool because like encouraging people to like learn that stuff. Like the Net Eurosy, like I wanted one so bad because I thought I could make my own video games, right? Like I'd make my own RPG. So it definitely encouraged me, but I obviously couldn't get a Net Eurose. But I wasn't about to learn Basic on the Sega Saturn either. But
no,
that being said, I have a modded Sega Saturn now, and you can bet your buns I'm gonna go check out Sega Saturn Basic and try to write some games on that.
Skip ahead, just one page, I think it is. Yeah, getting started. So this is cool, and this is something the next generation. Again, we've talked about how at this point their back of the magazine ads are almost entirely for developers and publishers. They're hiring coders straight out of this magazine because they're like, this magazine's readership is people who are taking video games seriously and thinking about video games seriously, step by step to underground game development on a budget. They're like, here, go get Code Warrior Pro from Metroworks. Go get 3D Studio Max if you have $2,000. If you don't have this, right, here's 3DFX's Glide, True Space 3. So it's like, here are all these tools you can actually use to make games. And they identify then the next page they talk about Princess Maker 2 and some of these other stuff, some of these other games. Crack.com. So yeah, I
turn on your VPN before you visit crack.com, kids.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of actually, I was looking up all the URLs in this magazine, and actually, unfortunately, most of the you have to use the Wayback Machine for most of them, and even then, not so much. So, but again, it just really struck me that already they're starting to go, hey, wait a minute, there's this huge space not being served by the console market or really even the PC right now, unless you really know where to look. In thriving indie games.
But again, like distribution was tough because what I think I'm not a historian on this, but I would say the big wave that really kicked things off were web games. When we started getting like Newgrounds and the like Flash games, that is when, as I look back, I think that was probably the start of things after this period of time that we're reading about.
All right. Well, it is almost time for us to get to our review of the Sega Saturn as a concept. All of the Sega Saturn. They are reviewing hardware here in Next Generation 36th issue. If you want to hear our review of their review of the Sega Saturn and highlights of the other consoles, stick around through the break. We'll be right back here on FunFactor. are having 5 stars out of 5 stars worth of fun today. Folks, if you are to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we'll read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air. But now it's time. Let's review Next Generation's review of Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn. The whole Sega Saturn. So yeah, let's go, Aiden, to who boy? It's page, I had it on here. 46. Where to play? The dust settles.
46?
46. It's not in the alpha or the now playing or finals or whatever. It's finals. That's what it is. Yeah. So you have the PC, and so what they do, they have the year in review. Little sidebar in a second here, but first, just a big column on. It says the current generation of consoles is rapidly approaching middle age. Anyone still looking for new technical highs from the current crop of 32 or 64-bit consoles is likely to be disappointed. Though the manufacturers might have you believe otherwise, these consoles, with the possible exception of N64, have already demonstrated their best visual pizzazz. This is not to suggest in any way there are no more good games coming from that. Right. So they're basically like I said, how does the PC fit into this? For that matter, why in our annual console report are we even including the PCL? Simply put, the PC is operating at a different level entirely from the current consoles. And again, your mileage may vary. They jump ahead they review every one of the consoles, and the format here, they give us the launch date, MSRP, the installed base. They give us the tech specs down to the M flops. Here's everything that comes with
M
it.
flops.
Or K flops, I don't know.
I don't even know what a teraflop is. Sony does like console reveals and they talk about teraflops, and I'm like, I don't, give me that in megahertz, please.
Yeah, floating point operations per second. Just moving,
I actually do sort
around.
of know what that is because the PlayStation was not great at it, which is why we got wobbly. The PlayStation wobble.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, I think.
Well, yeah, because the flops, because it was basically how many polygons could it push, right? Like how many vertices could it calculate at once,
right?
Right. And so the Saturn and N64 were both well behind the PlayStation in that. And so the N64 was a conscious choice to go, hey, let's have much better texture mapping. But then it's like, okay, so we get Link's face is like 4 polygons and then texture maps. Okay, well now Link's face can't move. Okay, well like, you know. So anyway, I'm
just gonna trust you on that one.
yeah. So they go through this for all of the consoles. PC, they kind of cheat and go. They review the PC for high end, mid tier, and low end PCs, which is kind of funny to me. But they give a current rating, and then they also do this time last year for each console. So yeah, we're at the Sega Saturn, and so launch date May 10th, 1995. $149. North American installed base 1.6 million. I believe PlayStation they estimated at 5.1 million. So right now it's there's already been a clear winner and a loser territory. Corporate status, Sega is at a critical point. After a seemingly endless series of blunders, the one-time console leader finds itself a distant third among the current generation of game consoles, a situation that's not likely to change despite positive efforts in software development. And yet, Sega is a company seeming well-suited for a rally. Sega rally. Not with Saturn, but with the console.
Went over my head, man.
I figured. I just wanted to, but not with the Saturn, but with the console it currently has under development, the next generation platform codenamed Dural. So again, we talk about some of the executives they've brought on board. Bernie Stoller, who will end up being like, the loving father of the Dreamcast, who worked his tail off to get that machine to market at the price with the modem and the features it had. So yeah.
Is that
oh,
that's your memory of Bernie Stoller?
That's what he said at the time when people asked him.
Interesting. Interesting.
I'm that's what I remember from magazines at the time.
Interesting.
Is that he was the one who's like, it's got to have a modem, it's got to have this price point.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, we'll get there. Presumably, in a future
we'll do a
episode.
Bernie Stoller episode one time.
Heck yeah! All right, cool. I'm excited to find out how wrong I am. So yeah, the kind of review story so far. Sega Saturn was never really cut out for its competition. Originally planned as the ultimate 2D system, and again, this, reasonable minds can disagree about exactly how much this was a 2D system with 3D bolted on, right? But they're kind of like, Saturn was forced to play second fiddle to PlayStation from the very start, a point only underscored by the two systems competing 3D brawlers, a rushed and graphically ugly port of Virtua Fighter for Saturn versus a visually stunning, if ultimately less deep, Battle Arena Toshinden from Takara for PlayStation. And I'm glad that they throw that sentence in, because we actually reviewed Next Generation's review of Toshinden, and they were not like, yeah, this is like any idiot can see way cooler than Virtua Fighter, which they should have said, because that was in fact true, because Virtua Fighter was not exactly pretty in the arcade, and it was horrifying on Saturn. And like, I don't care about your throws being the grappling being more correct when one game visually and graphically and sonically rocks and another game looks like a caveman smashing blocks together. It's absolutely huge gulf between these two things, right? So yeah, they continue to go down kind of the list of how things went. Marketing muscle. So they talk about all of the TV spots. I mean, this is really, really, really in depth, right? They even go shout out like the different ad agencies that are hired here. And then their 10 biggest games of this season. Burning Rangers. Yeah, some really good ones. And this actually, Burning Rangers was featured in, like I said, issue 35, which we almost did. They did the 25 games that are going to change the way we play forever.
Oh.
Burning Rangers and Panzer Dragoon Saga were two of them. Also, a hilarious list, by the way, because while they nailed a couple of these, they also had, you had Half-Life on there, right? But then they also had like Shiny's Messiah. They also had a game called Skies that was an MMO for Dreamcast that never came out. Not Skies of Arcadia.
Never came out. That's
yeah.
better.
Oh yeah. There were multiple canceled games on that list of games that are going to change the way we play forever. Ones that are totally anonymous, ones that were C minuses. Like any random 25 games, except they actually did get a bunch of all-timers. So anyway, here we go. Duke Nukem 3D, Sonic R, Quake, the Quake port we talked about already.
Yeah.
Worldwide Soccer 98, the heralded Worldwide Soccer 98. Enemy Zero, which I do not remember. The work of Japanese-based Warp is well documented and highly respected around the world. It is? Is it? Warp? Following a controversial fallout with Sony of Japan, Warp went to work exclusively with Sega. We finally have a US release for this innovative adventure game, and the only console it's available for is Saturn.
Yeah, I mean, even as somebody who didn't have a Saturn at the time, like I knew all these games. I know all these games like by sight. Even Enemy Zero. Sonic R was like a racing game. Made by Traveler's Tales, which is kind of cool. But yeah, like having Quake on there, Panzer Dragoon Saga, like seeing somebody recognize Panzer Dragoon Saga for what it was doing at the time is great. Like, these are good games. The Saturn is a good system. It just had some issues with execution and then ran into just the PlayStation, which without Nintendo's sort of oomph, the Saturn was just sort of like DOA for a lot of reasons. Avoidable reasons, probably.
Yeah. Despite the fact that the system will once again play host to some of this year's strongest software, the conclusion for Saturn this holiday season is not a bright one. And you can see them preloading, like, do not send us hate mail. We remember from issue 5, the hate mail from the Jaguar fans being like, you're so biased against the Jaguar. The
Jaguar
so
fans or the Jaguar fan?
Yes,
Yeah.
the one Jaguar fan. Plain and simple, among the current console systems on the market, Saturn has the least left to give. It's not to say it's not a great system for but it is clear that the Saturn is near the end of its brief and turbulent life cycle. The lack of any significant third-party support this holiday season for a system that most feel is already outdated can only mean one thing: the end of the road. So, current rating. This is fascinating to me. Current rating and this time last year. So you have the categories: demonstrated hardware power, current software library, future software prognosis, marketing muscle, overall future prognosis, and final score. And this is on, usually they have a 5-star system that has a very explicit rubric.
Yeah.
They do not.
I mean, like,
also they've got half stars
to explain
which they
the
don't
5-star
have
system.
half stars. No, but I appreciated that they did because it prevented grade inflation. But then also they have half stars here, which they don't have half stars in their game review system. So it's a
10-point scale.
Exactly. So at Christmas 96, demonstrated hardware power 3 stars. Now Saturn is less powerful, only 2 stars.
The Nintendo 64 is out now, so
no, that's exactly it, right? Current software library 3 stars, still 3 stars. Future software prognosis, it was 2.5 stars at the end of 96, 1 star at the end of 97. Marketing muscle 3 stars down to 2 stars. Overall future prognosis, again 2.5 stars down to 1 star. Final score, the 96 it was 3 stars. The 97, 2 stars out of 5 for the Sega Saturn. Which I believe for the PC it was 5 stars, 4 stars, and 3 stars for a high-end, medium, and low system.
Right.
Overall. And then N64 was 3.5 stars. Had been 4 the year before, which was its right after launch. Now 3.5 stars. Yeah.
I couple thoughts. First, okay, like just magazine design. Like we dog on magazines when they have like over the top or amateurish or like tacky designs, but what is with this rating design of this rating table? Like zebra striped, no like padding, like they're just like crammed in there. There's so much empty space because it's just like full page width lines with tiny little text. Like, what's going on here, guys? This just looks awful.
I don't know, and especially you look at the tech specs, like they put so much text a few pages earlier, just like in like 4-point font, like trying
this
to
stuff
squeeze all that
good. Like
but they're like, you could have used some of this space later in the mag.
Yeah.
You're only filling like 30% of the page tops with all this text here. That is weird. That's a good point.
Yeah. In any case, the Saturn is so fascinating, and we've talked before, and I am in the process of setting up a special episode, like bonus episode about the launch of the Sega Saturn in North America. The Saturn in North America and the Saturn in Japan are different consoles. Like the Saturn in Japan has an incredible library. And so if they're looking at this and current software library and future software prognosis, it's a different story if Sega of America and Bernie Stoller were more committed to like releasing all the weird, fabulous games that got stuck in Japan. Like, and like you even look at the success of the PlayStation, like Suikoden was on Saturn. Lunar Silver Star Story Complete was a Saturn game that got ported to PlayStation. And so you have these games like you want, Tomb Raider was a Saturn game. So like you have all of these games, you could have filled out a library that was even more impressive than what was there. And like people think back and they're like, oh, the Sega Saturn was like what, Bug and Clockwork Knight. And it's like, they had strange platformers, but they also had incredible fighting games, right? They had the Shining Force games. They had, the RPGs like Lunar, like Suikoden. They had Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Like they have all these like bangers that people point to as strengths of the PlayStation library. So like Saturn could have done that if Sega had supported it. And like, that's something that I would have liked to have seen addressed here somewhere, is to say like, hey, like, you know, it kind of feels like Sega's letting North American players down a little bit because they're not opening the market to all these games that people are loving on the PlayStation, and just not releasing them here.
Yeah, and as we talked about, there was that real schism between Sega of America and Sega of Japan.
Yeah.
It was in our Edge episode, I think they were talking about how Sega of America was basically making Sega of Japan make the 32X because they were like, look, the Saturn is too expensive. We can already tell it's going to be underperforming, underpowered compared to the PlayStation. We're not going to be able to sell this in the US at this price point without some of the games that we already know are coming from Sony. So you need to give us a medium option for people. And A, that was dumb, but then B, so Sega CD and 32X and 32X plus Sega CD, and then the Saturn was coming, and like, I mean, just completely saturated their own market, confused their audience. People had no idea what was up, right? So you basically couldn't have set the Saturn up to fail any harder. But then, like you said, there was also just like there on the ground games to pick up and bring over that they didn't. And I feel like that was kind of maybe the thing that finally convinced Japanese console makers and Japanese developers, like, hey, you can't only bring over 20% of your games anymore. It doesn't make sense. Like American movie makers now are going like, hey, look, we have to have the Chinese market in mind when we're making movies, for better or for worse, because to just shut ourselves out of the Chinese market is just saying no to like a bunch more money. Why would we not release this everywhere? Why would we only release it, and like, if we're going to go to the trouble to make it, it doesn't save us any development money. The localization doesn't cost that much compared to some of the developing a AAA game in the 32-bit, 64-bit era, so it feels like the failure of the Saturn and Dreamcast are going to be the guideposts for Japanese game makers going forward.
And to see like PlayStation like going after a lot of those weird games, those weird Japanese games, right? Like, and Final Fantasy VII success, like opening the doors for Xenogears. Like Xenogears would never in a million years have come out under other circumstances. And it sold 1 million copies, right? But like, and to touch on this, like the review does get into this. It says, quote, "In many ways, Saturn was doomed from the start. Too expensive, too difficult to program for, and launched amid a clearly illogical, if not outright insane strategy by Sega to market Saturn, Genesis, 32X, and Sega CD simultaneously. However, over the lifespan of Saturn, Sega always managed to put out a reasonably steady stream of good games on the system." Yeah, that's true, but like it was doing way more in Japan. And so like the excuses of it being too expensive or difficult to program for weren't fair, right? Like, it's not that it was difficult to program for. The games were there. They exist. I've played them. They're upstairs. Like they're there. It's just that Sega of America decided real quick that they just weren't interested in trying to compete against the PlayStation, Nintendo 64 and the North American market. And I wish we had seen a little bit more like of that here. Instead of saying like, hey, Sega of America is doing the best that they can, but all of these problems originate from Sega of Japan, the price, the difficulty of the architecture. So Sega of Japan made something hard and Sega of America is just doing their best. It's not how it really actually worked out. And I think in hindsight, they kind of missed the point of what actually happened with the Saturn and why it failed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Aiden, it is about that time to review the review. What score do you give this review of the Sega Saturn?
Yeah, I mean, despite leaving off on a criticism of like maybe not being able to predict the future, I actually think this is a pretty good write-up about the Saturn. And it's more complimentary in the moment than I often see from other places. Like a lot of places will dump on the Saturn and say, oh, like this, it doesn't have games, or, it underperforms compared to the PlayStation, or why would you buy the, like it digs into what's interesting and like what was going on with the Saturn, and why I've come to love the console. I like the games that they picked for the top 10 biggest games of the season. I think they were spot on with their scores, like against their, like 2 stars and 3 stars and 1 stars. Like that is sort of where the Saturn was at the end of 1997. And so, I'm going to give this review a solid like 8 megaflops out of 10, I think.
Yeah.
Is that a lot? I don't know.
I don't think it wasn't this. I don't know. I'll say, I'm in a similar place. And like you said, would someone be absolutely foolish to buy a Saturn this season? Absolutely not. With a software library of more than 200 games in the US, it could easily be considered a sound investment. And, with the price point, right? And this is back in the days when console prices went down over time, right? Like it launched at a little bit higher price. It's come down a little bit, So yeah, this to me, I feel like it's a really thorough review. They try to hedge against, both not just criticism from Saturn fans, but also really give it a holistic shot and explain, here's how we got to this point. Here's where it is. We have, we are going to be realistic about its strong points. We're also going to be realistic about its weak points.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to buy a console right now, just understand that you're buying the console that it is, and there's not a whole lot coming. Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. And to the same point, PlayStation and N64 both got 3.5 stars overall on the same thing, where you're like, hey, like they're thinking there's not going to be a whole ton of new things. Overall future prognosis 3 stars for PlayStation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, like it's a mid-cycle console, and they don't know that like Final Fantasy 9 is gonna come, right? They don't know that there still is gonna be a fair
story
bit
of Chrono Cross and like that late gen Squaresoft like banger era.
There's a ton of innovation and development still going to come, but it's not going to look like a generational leap the way that Dreamcast is, right? They're absolutely right. Dreamcast is coming, and when it comes, it's going to be that generational leap until the next ones come. But for there's a reason why they're already looking forward to PS2 and Dreamcast, and it's because you can see how much bigger it's going to be a leap. So I think this is great. I'm going to give it, because we have the half stars to play with.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually going to give it 9.5 megaflops out of 10. I think it's a really good review. Good. And I like the idea of a comprehensive console review every year. It's just go, here's where it's at, here's where it's headed. Pretty impressive to do all of them. Like
writing that much, like that feature with like PlayStation, N64, PC, Saturn, like for perspective, like that's a lot for a small team of writers to compile for like a monthly. Right? Pretty impressive stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that is our review of Next Generation's review of the Sega Saturn. Did we get it right? Leave our review at Apple Podcasts, post it as a comment on YouTube, and we will read the best, kindest, funniest, and most entertaining ones on the air. And hey, go ahead and pass this show around to all your friends like it's 3rd grade and we're on the playground. Shout us out on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at FunFactor Pod. Special thanks to Millennium Falk for all our amazing original music. Check out his work, his incredible Windows 95 themed website at millenniumfalck.com. Unlike these old magazines, you won't have to wait a whole month for your next installment. We're dropping new episodes every 2 weeks, and we are recording them a little bit beforehand on a similar cadence. We're putting it out on social media. We're putting it out on our Discord for FunFactor Ultra members. So if you want to join the fun, you want to be in the chat, you want to get shouted out live as we record this on stream, consider becoming a member of FunFactor Ultra. You also get ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and of course the fun of the interaction on our members-only channel. Just go to funfactorpod.com. I promise you will not miss the sign-up widget on our homepage. And if you do, you and we will have a maximum score in Fun Factor. So can you hear me in this scene now? You couldn't. Okay, that's fun. All right, great. I also don't have a cold open lined up.
I think this is a great cold open.
No,
We're going in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
We're going into the intro. All right.
Do you want to do are you hitting the theme song like now?
Well, I kind of went through it already, but I can again. Here we go. Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
I can't. The thing is, you just cut to that screen where you can't hear me.
Yeah.
And if you played the theme song then, I didn't know because I can't hear that either.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
So I was just typing in the chat going, what's going on? You can't hear me. What are we doing?
But yeah,
So,
okay.
All right.
I'll cut this all together into something better.
Yeah. No, we yes. It'll get.
But yeah, okay. Now, so cold open, and